Welcome back to the broadcast, and I'm right here with an all different conversation. And of course, right here, about 20 minutes of your time, we'll be discussing raising the children out there, and most importantly, raising the boy child. This in relation to the events of the day that took center stage after this 12-year-old from Consolata, got very many people shocked. And as though that was not enough, he came with a bombshell, of course, another bombshell alongside his cousin. But then again, we're not really technically trying to discuss him as a person, but or maybe his family members or his parents and all that, or the school, the teachers and all that. I think it's important that we go back to the drawing board. And as though people would argue that we are always reactive. No, reactive is not the word. These are conversations that we should constantly have, because every other time we're raising different generations, kids are born out here and there. So it's important that we talk and address some of these issues. I mean, some of the triggers that happen, of course, are good enough to get us to the drawing board, get us to that point whereby we should discuss this and much more. So welcome aboard. And of course, joining me this morning, Faris Murangai, Executive Director, Institute of African Families. Good to have you this morning, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, and now that you talk about the family, I mean, what has happened to the family setup?
Well, there has been changes, of course. We are in a transition as a society for quite some time. And I usually like referring to Professor Ali Mazurui, who usually says we have a triple heritage. We have the African tradition, we have the Eastern tradition, and of course we have the Western tradition. And in the whole process, we have found families in a crossroad, wondering which to take. The world is also moving very fast, and the social support system that used to exist and the values that we had there before have been put to test by the change of time. So family, many things have changed. Of course, even the family form, the way we used to know it then, the standard way that you have a father, a mother, and children, that has also changed over time. So we are in a situation of transitioning and see how to ground the family again to play its rightful role.
And we are here pointing fingers left, right and center, blaming others and blaming the parents and blaming the schools and all that. So technically what you're trying to say is that no one is to blame, or we should not blame anyone on the flaws that happen in our very own kids or in the family setup. But technically, look at the generational change that we're witnessing today and maybe just figure out how we're going to survive.
Exactly. Change is inevitable.
Right.
And cultures keep changing, and they're enriched by other cultures. We have to appreciate we have a lot that is coming from elsewhere, and it has affected us. And the effect can be negative, it can be positive. And what we need to appreciate, all of us, is to go back to the basics and find how do we position ourselves so that we become relevant as parents. Because these children, at the end of the day, family is the first place where the children get socialized. And what makes us human, one, is the genetic makeup. And number two, the environment where we grow. And that environment, the very basis is the family where the child has been born. That's where they start learning the very basics of life. And then after that, they can move to the community. So we should be asking ourselves as parents today whether we are preparing ourselves enough to be able to dispense this very fundamental role of raising human beings. If we are not doing that, then we are putting on a free drive and allowing children just to grow the way they know how and what they are learning from different sources, as I've said, whether you are talking of technology, you're talking of TV, TV, neighbors, friends, peers, and the like. But if we would get it right from the family, parent or parents doing their duty, then it becomes easier to make them transit and become relevant.
Looks like an open and new ground for everyone, including the parents themselves. So when we say that they need to prepare themselves adequately, what are some of the preparations that we're talking about, and how do they do that? Because they'll tell you, of course, we're coming from a whole different generation. So how best can we equip ourselves to a point whereby it would be good enough to parent some of these kids?
You know, learning is continuous.
Yeah.
And no one can claim to have the disposition of knowing everything. As a parent, it is paramount to seek to understand whether you will be required to go to a coach or to a class or read and invest time and any other required resources to make you well prepared to raise that child is very important, because it is out of that one is able to instill the basic values, to know how to discipline, so that child, as a child grows, you are using the right techniques to help the child grow, of course, and develop. If we don't do that, then there's a big problem. You know,
what then is the danger that comes along with you also being engulfed or maybe swallowed by this 21st century game? Because then we're talking about the 21st century parenting, which has proved to be a little bit technical for some of the parents who are from the old generation, and you know, trying to speed up to catch up with what is technically happening. You know very well that the young brain will grasp some of these things way faster than what the old brain will. So how best can they deal with this to a point whereby this is not going to swallow them or maybe drag them into this negative side? Because some of the people will tell you, you know, the bad things that you witness, of course, kids doing are things that they've learned from home. So in as much as something that, you know, is in connection to technology and, you know, the movement of life digitally and all that, it can clearly be squared or blamed on the parents who've probably learned this and now they're equally instilling the same, or on the process they're learning together at home.
True. You see, if the parent is able to learn and they stay ahead of the child, they'll be able to help that child.
Because and filter what is good and filters.
Yes, because the child is dependent on the parent to learn what is right and what is wrong. And being the primary place where they learn, then it means it is possible for these parents. And I usually say, there is no harm of admitting that you don't know anything, because you will seek to know. There are many forums where you can learn and know, so that you can keep a step ahead. As they grow, you are able to filter what they are going through. And of course, even the way, you know, simple things like learning how to communicate with these children. I can tell you, because I watched that clip that came out.
I hope you've watched the second one too.
Unfortunately.
There's a second one also.
I have not seen that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, one of the things is communication comes out very strongly, because perhaps the reason why that person is talking, they did not have an opportunity to express that in a secure environment, you know, maybe at home or wherever. The only way they could do it is to go public and vent it out there. So that brings out the issue of communication, how we communicate with these young people. Do they find us approachable? Are we there in the first place? Is home a safe place where one can come back and say, I've been harassed so much in school, in the bus, and this is what transpired, so that it is sorted out within that safe environment than exposing oneself out there for criticism and for backlash like the one we have witnessed. That's number one. Number two is the issue of even helping them to learn how to handle failures, because we may not be knowing the genesis very well, where it came from, but when you consider the age, maybe it's that interaction of boy-child. Is that boy prepared enough to manage to handle any unexpected response from that particular girl who received the vitriol attack? You know, the issue of feeling, well, even if I'm rejected, I'm a boy, I'm a man enough, life could move on, you know, that boy-child, boy-girl relationship. So that becomes very important. So at home, instilling these very simple, basic skills on how to handle life. And of course, being able to express oneself in a safe environment is very important. If it is not there, then they will talk to their peers, they will talk to the social media, they will talk, or they will keep it to themselves, and the next thing, they'll go into a depression, or they even commit suicide.
Well, interestingly, and I'd want to know which one is more competent or convenient. Is it instilling some of these values slowly by slowly, or maybe they probably are game-changing scenarios that would play in? Because in this particular case, you'd have expected that probably this would be a game-changing scenario for the parents, for them to realize that, oh, well, probably there's something that we were not doing right. Maybe the teachers at that level of the school should reintroduce caning, or even the students or this particular boy realizing that, oh, okay, so whatever I did was probably something that was not good. And we saw him apologizing, though people argued that maybe the apology was not so genuine because there were buts that were coming aboard. But aside from that part, and I'd want to assume that the latest clip is indeed a clip that came after, or unless they're going to come out and explain, because the latest then shows a person who's not really shaken at all, a person who is who's not even apologetic about the whole thing, and, reintroducing a different figure who's now the cousin, and equally saying, make this person as famous as you made me. So in this case, you ask yourself, then, are certain scenarios coming in handy to address some of this issue? And is it always too late? Sometimes when this kid is at this particular point, and you'd probably consider them as a person who's already gotten to a level that is irreparable. Is it always too late to say that you can revive the whole situation and change the bad deeds and the mentality of these young women?
The beauty of a human being is that they have the potential to change. That is inherent in themselves. We do appreciate that as children grow, the best moment to instill these values are the first few years. By 7 or 9 years thereabout, you have formed this person and the path and the trajectory they will take in terms of the values they are going to uphold in their life. But you know what? It is not late, because any human being at any age or any stage can change. What is required is those people who are providing the support system to be active and appreciate that actually there is a problem. Because one, we may be seeing a problem generally as a community, but the person who is offering this child the support that is required may not be seeing it as a problem, so to speak. And that's where now the challenge comes, because being the primary support and there is no help that is required, then you expect that person could go overdrive, without being controlled, But I would say, yes, it is possible if the right action is taken, right from the family and other institutions that are interacting with this particular person. And let me tell you that a child needs to learn how to relate with other authorities. Because when you find a child who is having a problem with such simple things like relationship with the others, what does it mean for 5, 6, 10 years to come when they are working? When they're interacting with the government authorities, the agencies that are enforcing the law, it will be a problem because of the way they view them. They cannot relate well with them, and they will put them into a very serious problem.
All right. So clearly this is not just left for the primary source of support, but technically for the entire society to step in.
Very, 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 you have put it very well. And remember, it also raises finger on us.
Yes.
Because when you transit from the society, you come to us. From the family, you come to the entire society. And sometimes when you see how those people who have the positions of influence address each other, abusing each other, and worse still, when you see it being done even by church leaders, when they are being exposed on media, abusing others in the church, using the same platform, who would otherwise be relied upon, the political leadership, people abusing each other, hitting each other below the belt. Maybe the child may wonder, why are you applying double standards? It is wrong for me to say, but an
influencer is saying it.
An influencer is saying it. I saw a pastor, a bishop, I saw a leader saying it. Why? So it also reflects on us, over and above what is happening in the family, what we have done as a society.
All right. Technically, we have failed to give our kids the ball.
Yes.
Let's just
yes,
talk about
yes,
the boy
yes,
child,
yes.
and we've decided to hand them the phone, you know, and all
Yes,
that. So
yes,
that's probably where
yes,
we've lost it
yes,
from. But now
yes.
moving forward, because then we need to get solutions as to this. Now that we realize that indeed there's that change of generation that we need to adjust to.
Yes, yes.
Because it all started by us blaming the parents, saying that they're not doing the right things, where are the values that were there back then, and we ask ourselves then, why should we bring the values that were there back then right now? And then how would they be a mismatch with the current situation of the current generation? So some of the tips, I'm sure there are very many parents who would want to get the major tips, the main tips that would guide them through in raising, you know, a well-rounded boy, a well-rounded girl, in this particular case, of course, the boy. And before you give us the tips, I think it's important then you tell us whether there's a difference on how we get to raise the girl child and how we raise the boy child.
There is. There is. In principle, there are common ways that cut across.
Yes.
But also you consider, as I said, that there is the genetic makeup that has a determining factor
Right.
on the character of the boy and the girl
Okay.
at different stages in life. And that ultimately would affect how you are dealing with each one of them. You will find at some point when the girl is composed, organized, that time, if you have a twin brother, they are overdrive.
They're in a different world.
They're in
yeah.
a different world,
Okay.
right? So that is the interplay of the genes
Right.
that are playing the role. So there is a difference on how you address both of them.
Right.
And of course, even the way the society designates roles and responsibilities, we will appreciate that what a boy can do, you remember that? That even a girl can do best.
better.
But I can
Right.
tell you today, if a car got stuck in a mud in the rural areas, first, men will get out, push
I know
when
the
the
girl will
ladies
be
are
just there
sitting
seated
inside.
pretty, yes, true.
They will only get out when
Worst
the
has
car
come
is
to the
fully
worst.
stuck.
Yeah.
But you can see the way it is designated. And in fact, the ladies know. There are situations they say, where are men?
True.
Because they know there are certain things that are designated for them. So that's why you find even understanding the role as the society has designated is also very important, because we are not living in out of the world. We are in a world where we know this falls in the domain of man, he can do best, and this falls in the domain of the girl, and she can do best.
Are there
in
times that we make mistakes on such? Because then, I don't know, I would really have loved to run away from this scenario, but then again, I think it's the best example that we have of late. So I'm assuming Nikita, who's the girl, the girl that this boy was hurling insults at, is a girl. And for a moment, the society has focused on condemning this little boy and forgetting the reason as to why this boy decided to hurl this insult is because at some point in time, Nikita equally insulted him. So we forget that whatever it is that Nikita said was not something that should be celebrated either. And now we focus on this particular boy child. Are there times that we make mistakes whereby we look at the boy child as the strong one and we assume that they can figure things out, and we focus much on the girl child and forget about them?
Yes, which is a mistake, because when this boy probably is a recipient of bullying,
Yeah.
and he was just reacting and responding to that. So there are moments when you give a softer, you handle with a glove,
touch,
yes, to the girls,
girls.
and leave out the boys. And the boys can come back fighting because they have felt you have crossed the line.
Right.
We need to appreciate that as the girls get empowered, the boy needs to come up and they need to move together. So that, because if boys usually, or men generally, they will not speak so much.
Right.
But of course, an empowered girl can speak a lot.
Yeah.
And the reaction of the boy could be hitting below the belt.
Right.
Where that is possible, because I cannot talk much. So as we empower, we should consider both,
Right.
so that one does not feel disadvantaged and start hitting back
back. Yeah,
as a
yeah, yeah.
response.
Wow.
That has to be observed.
All right, in that
Yes.
case, as we get to wind up, I think it's important that we touch on some of the key things, the tips of raising a well-rounded boy. Now, in that sense, we're talking about what are the do's and the don'ts and at this particular time. So what are some of the key things that you need to do to get a well-rounded figure and boy and all that?
Yes, one is to appreciate the growth and the development stage
Right.
of the boys. A parent should be very deliberate in understanding various stages. There are many.
Yeah.
And then that will help them to know the fears, the worries and the crisis they are going through at that particular time.
Yeah.
So understanding the developmental process is very important. Number two is the availability of the parents to this boy.
Okay.
Mother and father, or a male figure and a female figure, because of both of them have a contribution. If they are not, if one of them is missing, then that boy will have a problem.
Right.
If mother is missing, there will be an emotional problem. They cannot manage it. If the father is missing, there will be a problem because masculinity will not be able to be nurtured in this particular boy. The other thing to note is seeking help out there when things are getting out of hand is not a problem.
Right.
Because sometimes, because of the environment where they have grown in and what is happening around them, a parent may find they are being challenged. It's not wrong to find out for solution from the professionals so that they can be helped. And then also ensure that the energy, boys have energies, that those energies are well spent.
Can really be annoying sometimes.
Yes, it can be annoying. Not in the house, watching the TV all through and growing big, eating on the couch. They need to be out there. Enroll them to games or sports or clubs where they can spend that time and their energy, you know, so that they can develop the required masculinity. And of course, now the community as a whole, and the family should step up.
All right, thank you so much. And technically, the negatives of those should not be done.
It should not be done.
Yes, the opposites of those should not be done. Well, thank you so much. Probably in 30 seconds, your last words to the parents out there, to the children out there, and the society at large.
Thank you very much. Just to say that family is the primary place where the right values and perspectives of life are shaped. And therefore, before we call on the religious leaders, before we call on political leaders, the community and the society, let us as parents start by doing what is right, and we can be able to get what is right by seeking to understand. The information is there, it's out there, and we can learn and be able to become effective parents and raise children who are responsible for themselves and the entire society.
As they would rightfully put it, charity begins at home. Indeed. Thank you so much, Faris Rangai, Executive Director, Institute of African Families. It was great having you this morning. Of course, conversation that we'll always be having time and again as we try to shape up the family setup and most importantly, prepare ourselves to face the world out there.